get to tie breaks to win the tournament. That means the white games must be what he's looking forward to.
The white games are key, and with that in mind, Wei Yi starts with his queen's pawn. There's no queen's gambit accepted today, so actually this is interesting. Levon Aronian has completely changed his opening strategy. He's gone back to a more solid type of repertoire, what he's been playing since he was a child, basically. Levon Aronian, we see the Nimzo Indian defense, and this variation, I think it's called the same-ish, and White's pawn structure now ruined, but White has got the bishop pair and will have the opportunity to build a big pawn centre. This is really topical. A lot of the kind of elite players are fighting out this type of position right now. Black's kind of flexibility, solid structure against White's dynamism of the pawn centre. Look at White's centre, it's beautiful here. But there is a weakness on the c4 square. White's doubled c-pawns, and Black is going for those guys immediately. This is going to be a big opening battle.
Oh.
Who has studied their Nimzo Indian defence more deeply? This last bishop move. I mean, I'm not 100% familiar with all the different move orders here, I must admit. There's so many. I mean, for example, with White, you could have brought a knight out first. You could bring a bishop out first. You could push a couple of pawns. With Black, also, you could have castled the king early on. You could have pushed some pawns in the centre. Both sides have so many options on every single move.
Yeah, and just checking my database, I can see that Levon Aronian has actually played this position with the black pieces once before against Magnus Carlsen himself in a blitz game in St. Louis, now his hometown. And that game ended in a draw. So I think Levon will be feeling pretty confident. And he goes for the same formula. Just controlling White's centre by advancing a small pawn forward, and then he's going to get ready to attack one of those weak pawns. And actually, Simon asked Wei Yi to play directly, to go for the throat, and this is exactly what Wei Yi is doing.
And we have the Mean Girls.
The Mean Girls.
The Mean Girls, yeah.
The four-pawn attack. Yeah. And, yeah, it's at least clear what Wei Yi wants to do. He wants to throw all the pawns forward. He could even throw the white g-pawn forward, potentially, at some point. Have a five-pawn structure there.
Yeah, maybe. I mean,
maybe a bit weakening, but...
I think, didn't Ivan Sokolov write a very good book on this opening? And one of the advantages of being a commentator is you get to see lots of openings which you wouldn't necessarily see or play. And I haven't really seen this opening from a White perspective, but I'm kind of looking at it and I'm thinking, yeah, this is the kind of thing I would play, you know, because you've got all those pawns. They can start an attack at some moment. You can put your pieces behind them, exactly what Wei Yi is doing, and it's a nice, aggressive setup. So I'm actually thinking, yeah, this is certainly an opening which I could play. We're now going to see Black grab one of those bishops, and I think this is a clever move, trying to get a focal point in the centre of the board, trying to hold the centre before White takes it over. And this must all be, I'd imagine, Jovanka, reasonably well known?
It's been played before. I mean, 2 games in the database, but I imagine this is very thematic because, as you mentioned, Black has to take some control in the centre, otherwise he's just going to get steamrolled, as you mentioned. And here, we've now reached a point where there are no more games in my database, hasn't been analysed before, so... well, the players are now going to start freestyling.
Yeah, and interesting last move from Wei Yi. He's just offered up a pawn sacrifice, actually, and the position could look very much like a king's gambit if Black does accept the sacrifice. Right now, a lot of pressure on Black's central pawn. This pawn attacked 3 times from White's 2 pawns here and from the White knight. So you have to give way with this pawn somehow. Why not grab a pawn in the process? And, yeah, this looks very much like a king's gambit where Black has an extra pawn. But the question is, can White obtain activity? White needs something now. You're a pawn down and you have this kind of long-term weakness of the doubled pawns on this side of the board. So you need to kind of win in the middle game. Any endgame is going to go against you with White. The question is, do you just castle the king or do you push forward?
I'm a little bit surprised, David, that White gave up his dark square bishop as easily as he did in the game. Maybe that's the normal move. I don't know the theory, but I would have wanted to have kept that bishop. Imagine you had that bishop now in the current position. You could just take the pawn back, and you can see that becoming a really strong piece. So a little bit surprised that White went for this system, and it's also a little bit worrying for Wei Yi that he's slowed down now, because he's basically, well, you could say a gambit, but he's also lost a pawn. I mean, has he just, I mean, this is not really the point to slow down, because it might be, you know, if he hasn't looked at this position before the game, that's a worrying sign, because obviously if you sacrifice a pawn in the opening, you should, it's danger, and you should really know what you're doing, and you should have done your homework. So I'm kind of thinking, OK, maybe he has done his homework, so he's moved quickly there.
Yeah, but it is surprising. I mean, if we just rewind a couple of moves here, for example, if you want to play it safe, you could trade a set of pawns and then bring your knight out. So, for example, you just protect everything in the centre here. You're never going to be a pawn down. But in the game position, if we fast forward back to the game, after black grabbed this pawn, we've seen both sides castle their kings to safety now. It's not just the fact that you're a pawn down with black, but how are you ever going to attack? Like Simon says, without your dark-squared bishop that previously sat on this square, ready to come out. Now it's a rook that sits on this square instead. And how do you ever get at the black king? Black's king looks actually pretty safe right now. You have to start attacking somehow, but I'm struggling to see it. Also, white does have a weakness in the centre. This pawn is a bit vulnerable on an open line.
Yes, it's a tricky one, right? Because it's not very clear for how white can actually move forward. So it might be one of those things like a bow and arrow. You know, you retreat the bow just to get it forward. So I'm just thinking maybe the knight can step backwards to d2 so that the rook can capture the pawn. It makes me very nervous, actually, to play material down.
Yeah.
I love it. Generally, I don't know why. It's like that risk factor, you know. But
Life on the edge.
Yeah. But he's played your move there, Jovanka. And David, you were saying about the attack, and well, I suppose if he can take that pawn with his rook, his pieces are very good, aren't they? There might be some good, you know, combined with the light squared bishop opening up. So it still seems a bit scary for black here.
One question for you guys here then, Simon, with that in mind, for example, if black moves the queen, white's rook, you said, has nice attacking potential now. You swing the rooks across, go for this black knight, remove that defender. Looks pretty decent for white, but would you ever get tempted as black to keep this pawn intact and defend it?
Oh, that's such a kind of King's Gambit type of defence, and you like go all in. I wouldn't even dream, it wouldn't even cross my mind, I have to say.
Too open.
I mean, the normal move in the King's Gambit against that is just to push the pawn, this pawn here, and you know that could just really open up everything towards black's king. So I don't think we're going to see that, are we? I mean, a bit greedy. Yeah. So
Levon's done more surprising things than that. I was just trying to find a way, playing devil's advocate, just trying to keep this black pawn intact. But if he can't keep it, then he has his chances.
Thinking now, Levon, Aronian, they have castles, so I guess we are out of the opening. But on the subject of openings, have you guys heard about the game show, The Chase?
Yeah.
American?
Yeah. I saw this clip earlier.
Yeah, you did?
Yeah, it was great.
It was posted, a clip on Reddit from the show. So a question the other day on that show was, performed by Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru Nakamura in 2021, the double bunk cloud is a rarely seen maneuver in what? And the contestant, I think he answered juggling? Something like that. But then the expert, he said, don't you know who Magnus Carlsen is? He's the highest rated player in the world, so he got it.
Nice.
Very nice.
I don't think anyone in Norway would fail that question, would they?
Everyone would,
Everyone knows who Magnus is over here, don't they? But in England, it's a little bit different. So
Is it English? I thought it was American. It was maybe an English show.
It might be English, I think, actually. Yeah.
But it's cool. So they had a question from the Champions Chess Tour, double bunk cloud, played last season.
We're getting famous.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, Levon does touch his g-pawn, but doesn't move it 2 squares forward. Instead, just makes a little bit of air for his king, but at the same time, potentially weakens the dark squares. And Wei Yi very quickly just captures that pawn. And this was Levon's idea all along, to attack the rook with his knight.
Yep. Looks like a superficial square for the black knight, but at least he gains a bit of time. The black knight was maybe a target where it previously stood anyway. So white's rook will take a couple of steps back now, and just depends what Levon wants to do next. Maybe bring the black queen out.
Yep. Well, I think we're looking at some exciting games, and it is the final day of the tournament and also the tour final for these two. And so, you know, that means a lot of excitement, a lot of adventure, and we love it when you at home get involved and join in on the fun and action. So we are once again having a selfie competition.
Yay.
How are you watching the tour? We want to see those photos. Remember to take them in landscape mode and use the hashtag #ChessChamps, and we will feature them on the show. And today's prize is 1 year's Chess24 premium membership. So remember, hashtag #ChessChamps. We want to see the selfies. We want it, the more interesting, the better.
Absolutely.
We love it.
Absolutely.
And also, we should remind everyone that we are having a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
How many grandmasters can you name in 30 seconds?
Yes.
And if you want to get in on the fun there, then you also can tweet us using the hashtag #ChessChamps and also Crypto Cup Challenge. It's not so easy, as some of us found out yesterday.
So, Ivanka, who's going to be tested today? I mean, like, Kaya put me on the spot yesterday. I mean, it can't just be me who's on the spot there. Someone's got to have a go.
But remember, the challenge, it goes on for the whole FTX summer of chess.
OK.
So maybe
that sounds like a cop-out to me, basically. So, yeah, I don't know.
I must admit, I was pre-warned that Simon was going to be tested and that was going to be spur of the moment. So I couldn't suppress my laughter when he was doing it because Simon was like, oh no. Hello.
Yeah, I got trapped.
But you did good, Simon.
Yeah.
Average, very average, I think. So.
All right, well, you didn't mention any of these two, Wei Yi or Levon Aronian, and now it's Wei Yi thinking for over 2 minutes on this move. He played very fast in the openings yesterday, but is this opening, is it more difficult, harder to maneuver?
Possibly. I guess there's just a lot of choice. We talked about earlier, both sides being really flexible, but then a few exchanges happened and maybe the positions become a bit more concrete now. You have to be a bit more accurate. First, I guess Wei Yi has to just remove his rook from the firing line. The black knight on the edge of the board is attacking it. And maybe if we jump in, we can have a vote. Where do we think this rook is going to move to? It's attacked. Simon, do you think it's going to retreat, first of all?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to push it 1 square forwards, but I mean, that is just like a bit too much. So I expect... yeah, this idea Dave is showing, but I don't think this is anything at all, really.
Maybe the black queen just comes out, slides across, if white doesn't take this pawn.
Yeah.
Also, the question is, you're attacking, maybe you don't even capture the rook.
It doesn't really do anything. So I expect the rook to personally go back 2 squares. So I got the option of doubling my rooks on the half-open file. That, to me, looks the most natural. And I expect Aronian's ideas to bring the queen out, but I think I'd put the rook there, or maybe even the square in front of it, because then it can swing over, and we know how much I love a bit of swinging with my rook, should I say? Just clarify that, just in case there's anyone wondering there. But yeah, the swinging rook. So that's also another option, but that does go into the line of the bishop. So I don't know. That's the way I'd be thinking, David. Anyway,
Yeah, my vote is for that square actually as well, because I think that if black is tempted to open up the position, that's probably going to favour white because he needs to initiate some activity, some dynamism. He wants that fire on the board, and more chances for Levon to go wrong. And I also quite like this rook. I'm going to call it a roving rook.
You like swinging as well.
No, I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say rook roller. Or rook, no, the rook roller's the incorrect one.
Rook over.
Rook over.
Rover.
Rover.
Rover, yeah. That's the one. So, yeah.
I'm going to be difficult and I'm going to vote for this square. So I don't think we'll bet on this. It's not the most critical move.
Yeah.
But it is surprising to see Wei Yi spend
look at that.
nearly 5 minutes just deciding on where to put his rook. You definitely don't want to put it back the whole way because then you get in the way of this rook kind of joining on this square. So it would just be logical. Step back 1 square or 2 squares. Is he really considering stepping forward, going for this knight? Maybe. But it's not really worth spending 5 minutes on this kind of thing where black isn't even forced to capture and kind of take the sacrifice anyway.
This is one of the problems I think Wei Yi showed yesterday, right? I mean, he in quite obvious positions, his rook's attacked, you move it, right? Yeah. He was spending too long. And that later on, when he got these winning positions, he wasn't able to convert them because he'd used up all his time. So I don't know why he's doing it here. You know, I would have thought he'd learnt from the mistakes of yesterday because it is quite an obvious position, really.
Yeah, and it's like you said, there will be consequences maybe in 30 moves' time from the 5-6 minutes that he's spent now. And a more experienced player like Levon or Magnus Carlsen or kind of what the top players in the world, they would just play according to their instincts. Retreat 1 square, retreat 2 squares, whatever. They're both fine. And then the critical moments will be ahead. I mean, this is where I would also waste maybe 2-3 minutes on the clock, but I don't think I would be spending 6 minutes on this one retreat.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem very impractical. I have a question for both of you. Do you think that this is an effect of Wei Yi perhaps playing so early in the morning and the tournament, of course?
Late at night?
Yes. Yeah, late. Is it not early morning at the minute?
One of the two, isn't it?
Huh?
I guess it depends how you...
You don't call it at the morning if you haven't gone to sleep and just woken up, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, OK. Late at night in the... I always say in the early hours of the morning.
Yeah.
Midnight. Oh, that's definitely nighttime.
Yeah. I rarely go to sleep before midnight, so to me it's late night.
If you're saying early hours of the morning, it's like dawn when the sun's coming up. I mean, the sun's gone down for a while. It's definitely late.
When does it shift from night to morning for you, David?
Yeah.
At what time?
Morning starts at 1 p.m. or 2 p.m. That's a chess player's morning.
I would say like 6 a.m. 5 a.m. maybe. 5 a.m. is morning. Everything before that is late night.
Early hours of the morning is anything up to 10 a.m. Surely.
For me, early hours in the morning are like 1
a.m.?
1 a.m. to 3, 4 a.m. and then it just becomes morning. And yeah.
I don't know what the hell's going on at the moment. I'm just sitting here dazed and confused.
Someone's got a very strange dictionary out there.
Yeah. I'm sure I'm incorrect, but that's my... I guess it's the kind of thing if you're early, but I'm always been an early
Exactly.
bird.
I think it depends if you're an early bird or if you like to stay up at night.
Yeah,
That's the difference.
I'm going to become an even earlier bird, actually.
Ooh.
Because, obviously David and myself are going to India and they're ahead in time. And we actually had Pragnananda and everyone talking about how they adjusted their hours in order to train for competitions. And I will be doing the same. So it won't be 6 a.m. in the morning. It will be 5.
Oh. When will games...
Vanka, why? Why would you do that to yourself?
This is like what normal people do, David. You do like office jobs and stuff, and a lot of people do this,
Have chess games at 3 p.m.
Yeah,
every
because
day.
I was going to ask, when
True,
will the game
that's true.
start? 3 p.m.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there will be 3 hours
it?
ahead.
But that means you'd be waking up, what? I mean, that's 3.5 hours ahead.
9, and that's...
8:39, even that's risky.
I think
you've been awake for...
I think you've got to do what suits
7
you, haven't
hours,
you?
but-
I mean, I used to be a night person, but now I'm a morning person.
Ah,
So
you were able to actually turn it around.
Yeah, I'd probably stay up at night and get up early, to be honest. But I mean, yeah, I think it's just what suits you, really, isn't it? And you're a morning person, clearly, Vanka, and imagine you're a night person, David, definitely. Yeah, so. Yeah, but it's important to get the right routine in a tournament or whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, going back to Wei Yi playing
9 minutes.
playing at this time. Yeah, I mean, first of all, why is he taking so long? It's just crazy. At this point, he's probably going to play a bad move because he's overthinking what should be a relatively simple position. It's crazy.
Super simple. Just
I think this is a record in the tour.
I mean...
Thinking for 9 minutes.
Yeah, I'm not even in a complicated position. It doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, the only thing I can be thinking of is he must therefore be looking at a crazy move, because otherwise you just move the rook. But him playing at this time, I was thinking that, but he's the one who, and he's played a normal move, he's the one who's been prolonging the games anyway. And if he was tired, you would have thought he'd make the game shorter. So that's a bit of a surprise. OK, David, they banged out some moves there.
Yeah, I mean, very natural moves again. Black's queen did indeed come out, as we suggested, and after White's rook's doubled up now on this F-file, Black's remaining rook in the corner has swung to a very nice square. White's queen feels a bit uncomfortable on this kind of semi-open E-file. Big pressure on White's pawn centre. Wei Yi, again, very natural move. I mean, these are the first moves that come to his mind, so he could have this exact same position with 9 extra minutes on the clock. It's
Do you
strange.
think it's nerves?
It must be something, not trusting his instincts. Maybe he was calculating, as Simon said, a bit of a weird move, and then he decided against it. But in classical chess, when you have 2 hours on your clock, you have that luxury. You can kind of fall down the rabbit hole a few times and get carried away calculating variations. But rapid chess is a completely different type of animal. You need to save that 9 minutes for later. And if this game is decided, a bit like yesterday, in the time scramble or Wei Yi not having enough time on the clock, we can pinpoint that one moment. We'll say, OK, it was move 17, where he spent 9 minutes and he would love to have that one moment back again.
What's the most you spent on a move, David? I mean, because obviously you
Over
love
an hour, easily.
You love your deep thinks to understand the position, and it works very well for you. So, but over an hour, right?
Over an hour.
Over an hour.
Several
wow.
times, maybe.
Wow.
Yeah, I've done that early in the career when the time limit was different. I think it's a nice thing to do. But and Jovanka, you can roughly, have you ever done over an hour?
No, I don't think so. But I mean, I do remember, and I hate to bring up bad memories for you, Simon, but I do remember in our game, we played a very unusual time control where it was like 1.5 hours for all our moves with some added time. And I remember there was one point where I could have sacrificed. And I saw that there was a sacrifice, but I was like, this is not practical. I'm going to have to navigate things. I'm going to have to burn a lot of time on my clock in order just to make sure that the sacrifice is sound. And I was like, no, I'm going to play something else. That I know is going to give me an advantage. And yeah.
Crushed me.
Yeah.
And I was thinking also just a nice story about Bronstein. He was playing, he's a very famous player, David Bronstein, and maybe you guys have met him because he played in Hastings quite a lot. He was maybe one of the strongest players never to become world champion. He had a close match with Botvinnik. We see another move here, just the Queen going forwards with some night jump ideas. But in Hastings, they have a game it starts on the 1st of January. And he was playing on the 1st of January, and he was sitting there with the white pieces. And move one. And he just sat there for like 55 minutes on move one.
Yeah.
On move one. And he was like, everyone was like, what's he doing? He's just sitting there on move one. He hasn't played one move.
What?
So he obviously won a lovely game. I say, obviously, he's very strong. And someone says, well, what are you thinking of? And he goes, well, it's the start of a new year. I wanted to start the year good. And I felt like I should bring a night out. So he's like, I felt like, get the nights out. That feels right, better than bringing a porn out. So he's just thinking how he wanted to start his year.
Wow.
So he's like drifting off probably into his other well. And he decided to bring a night out because he thought that was a more funky way to start.
Yeah.
I thought that's quite nice, actually.
I like it.
Did you know, Bronstein, on the subject of that, he was famous for doing this, actually. I mean, his teammates hated him because, he'd play for the Soviet Union and he'd do as Simon says, turn up, sit there and think for 20 minutes on the first move. And the teammates were like, just make a move, just get going. And, of course, he always found himself in time trouble as well. And it was kind of a little bit unforgivable, I think. Although I do like that story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, Wei, he is definitely spending time, taking down to 3 minutes. Will this be dramatic for him?
Back in the tank, and the best he can come up with is an exchange of queens. He's just dropped his knight back where it came from, just on the last move, and he's trying to get the queens off the board, but this can only favour black, surely. If you look at white's pawn structure again, white has an isolated A pawn, long-term factor. White has doubled C pawns, also a long-term factor, and those will kind of add up in black's favour once the queens disappear from the board. Maybe there was just nothing better. Maybe he had to do this because there was some serious pressure on white's centre anyway, and black's knight was also threatening to maybe jump into the position. But yeah, having spent all that time and having to play a move that doesn't really favour you strategically, it's not a good sign for Wei Yi.
Maybe a draw off as well here, because, OK, Aronian's not taking the draw, but had he stepped back with a queen, then we could have seen a repetition.
But how can Levon take advantage of this? So he has much more time on the clock. It seems like Wei Yi is a little nervous. He is thinking a lot in this game. How can Levon take advantage and maybe go for the win in this game?
He will try and go for the win, but he won't be able to do that anytime soon. He'll have to slowly build up. I mean, the advantages that black has here, they are very long-term. As we mentioned, the A-pawn, isolated. That could be a target for maybe the black knight or black rooks later on. These pawns are maybe more of a direct target. For example, I'm not expecting it right now, but in the near future, black could fix these pawns by pushing his own pawn forward. These guys are never, ever moving again. And then slowly but surely, for example, you can bring a bishop to the edge of the board, put some pressure on this diagonal. You could swing a black rook across, try and force white to close the centre. If white closes the centre, white's pieces lose a lot of dynamism. Also, if you just look at the white pawns right now, they look very nice. They control a lot of squares. But remember, with great space comes great responsibility. And white's pieces are actually tied down defending, especially this pawn. White's rook is passive, defending it. White's bishop is passive, defending it. And white's knight also passive, defending defending this pawn as well. So, yeah, it does feel like Levon For example, he can start by just improving his pieces. He can step one rook forward, step the other rook behind, put even more pressure on this pawn. White's pawns here, they cannot really step forward without creating even more weaknesses as well. So targets here. Black's knight at some point I expect to kind of drop back and reroute itself into the centre, maybe in conjunction with this pawn move I mentioned. It's just a whole bunch of ideas for black. And what's white doing in the meantime? Maybe white will start pushing forward on this side of the board, gaining some space there, but no real targets and no attack ever with the queens off. If white could have this position with the queens back on the board where black's queen was passive, then he'd be happy. But that's why Levon Aronian went so active with the black queen and why we saw the queens disappear. Right now, it's, in my eyes at least, it's kind of only Levon who can hope to have an advantage in this type of position. But of course, all of those plans I was highlighting, they're quite long-term, they're quite slow. So it's still a while before Levon can claim anything too big, before we can get too excited.
Yeah. But I have to say, you know, we saw several times where Yi shake his head. He's not happy with his position. He knows that he is going to suffer, and this is not good news. And whilst Levon is... Well, no, I spoke too soon. The bishop does take a step backwards. That was a little bit surprising to me. I didn't expect that move.
Yeah.
And, well, I was just going to share with you a few selfies because we are running a selfie competition and it's super exciting. And there we see Levon, Wei Yi, excuse me, double the rooks on the open line. And Rafashon is cheering for Aronian. He says, right from Brazil, big fan. And we also have a selfie from Reld Nabe, who says, watching while cleaning the kitchen.
Oh.
So he's not the only one cleaning, just like Levon. Not exciting, but with a brand new baby, you have to multitask all the times.
Congratulations.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And finally, Rob Durham is watching the show and enjoying a new TV.
Oh.
So there we see. We're on the big screen.
Yeah.
Aya and David and Simon. And OK, see some... let's go back to the game.
Yeah. Those rooks, are they dangerous? Two rooks in the same line?
They look nice and pretty, but everything they're attacking, I mean, they're only eyeing up a pawn right now, and that pawn is well fortified, well defended. I mean, I like that move for white, but I don't really see what's next. We were kind of slightly confused by the idea of black's bishop retreat, black's bishop going back to its start square. I guess the idea is just to stop white's pawns on the king side advancing forward. For example, black's knight on the edge of the board could have been attacked by a white pawn, but black's bishop from afar covers any potential white pawn advances. The question is, again, what next for Levon Aronian? I would just lift up black's rook on the e-file 1 square. There we go. Just to defend the pawn that the white rooks are looking at. And also pretending maybe, or hinting at the fact that the black rooks might stack up on the e-file towards white's central pawns.
I think I heard you say before, David, you want to protect your pieces or your pawns 3 times.
Yeah, if 3 times, and then they're nearly always safe. If you can achieve that. So black's f7 pawn that the white rooks were looking at was not a weakness at all. If a pawn's defended twice, occasionally there'll be a sacrifice on that square, or someone can break through on that square. But yeah, protect it 3 times and no chance of trouble.
OK.
Now black's knight can jump in. What do we think about this last knight move by Wei Yi?
I think he's stuck for a plan, to be honest, so he just made a random move. And I agree with you, the knight can jump in. I mean, but the question is, what else is the knight going to do? I mean, is it going to perhaps take a step back, go to the e6 square, and then just go on a few more adventures until it finds the perfect location? Or...
I mean, the black knight is not on a perfect location right now, so I would...
It's tempting, isn't it? Just to put it to attack the bishop, and maybe you can actually ask some questions as to how white is going to defend one of those double pawns.
Yep. Of those white double C pawns, it's always the one in front that's the first target, so that pawn could become a target for the black bishop later. But Levon, I mean, he doesn't look fully focused right now. He was looking away for a while. He doesn't look as energetic as we saw yesterday when he got a small advantage, it was bang, 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 the moves were coming thick and fast.
Yeah, and he's getting a bit short of time as well here. I mean,
He needs the seeds.
He does.
Catching up. So
I do notice the top players, where they spend most time in a chess game is always when it's the planning phase. With the calculation, even if it's quite complicated calculation, they can do it very quickly. because they structure their thoughts. They look at the checks, the captures, the threats, bang, 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 2, 3, 4 moves. They can see into the future. But when there's no forced reply for their opponent, they're thinking, oh, I could maneuver my knight to this square, I can move my knight to my bishop to this square. But in the meantime, the opponent has 4 or 5 moves, and then it's kind of a slower process of thinking.
He's still got that dodgy light, hasn't he?
Yeah, I just
There you
noticed
go.
it, yeah.
Sort it out.
And Wei has been looking a lot up in the air. What does that mean again, David, when they look up to...
Normally, if they look up kind of top left, it means they're remembering something. If they look just straight up, it's like, why? Where's the inspiration, please? Some inspiration. If they look right, it often means they're kind of bluffing normally, or like they're kind of like trying to work something out. I think the memory, at least, is the left side.
Okay.
Usually.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, I've always seen Hikaru is always looking up at the ceiling.
Yeah, I think he's... Yeah, with Hikaru, you never know, because half of it is kind of reaction, of course, like all chess players. Half is maybe a performance.
Yeah.
But, I mean, all the top players, they have these kind of little quirks, little habits.
I mean, it's part of the game as well, right? Play the psychological game as well.
Yeah, and Levon, well, his time is also ticking down. Now he's under 4 minutes on the clock. I mean, he has plenty of time, but he has to come to a decision soon, and he steps back with his knight. We were talking about the knight jumping forward, and, well, he's going to attack the pawn on e4.
Yeah.
I feel that this, maybe this is a draw offer.
Oh, in what way?
As in the white knight might drop back. I don't know why I keep trying to find a draw in this position. To be honest.
You're clearly loving this position, Simon.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that black is probably better, and Aronian won't take a draw if he's better. So, but I mean, again, if the white knight goes back, then the black knight has to move again. I can't see any. So, but maybe he's doing a Wei Yi. Maybe he's just repeating positions just to
See, the knight's just dancing.
show his boss as well here. I mean, I don't think white's okay. This is interesting. Wei Yi has. He's gone straight forwards.
Yeah, so not playing for the draw, this pawn was attacked, going forward. And what's Levon going to do here? If you trade off this pawn, then suddenly it does look a bit scary. White's knight now on a great central square, and these rooks have targets. The black knight has to move. Maybe you could swap off the black knight now for the white knight. Maybe this is what Levon is banking on if the knights disappear. Still minimal danger for black. These pawns aren't great either, long term. But... yeah, big decision. If you don't take this pawn, then the only real option is to go back with the knight. I guess you could jump forward, but the thing is, here you're attacking with the white rook. You have to deal with a counterattack. Pawn takes pawn, hitting the black rook. It suddenly gets a bit complicated. Maybe black just keeps it simple, though, and takes a pawn back. And it's about whether this pawn is a weakness. It's an isolated pawn now. OK, Levon doesn't want to deal with that kind of issue. Bit surprising he spent all that time on a non-forcing move and then played quite a forcing move quite quickly. And, OK, as predicted, he's trying to get the knights off the board. So double attack, hitting the rook and the white knight. I'm expecting white now to just capture the knights. And the only option here, I guess, is to try and counterattack against the black rook. But no, that's too flashy. Take the knights off the board is what Wei Yi is thinking. And
pre-move as well, I think.
Yeah, pre-move by Levon Aronian. He took back the knight here automatically because it was a safe pre-move. We say a safe pre-move because black's bishop landing on this square would never, ever happen unless black's knight was taken. So you don't want to pre-move something that, you know, your opponent could win some material. But here it's only legal. Bishop to g4 if the white knight captures.
I think you said there was a dramatic pre-move in the preliminaries. Was it for Ariantari?
Yeah, I mentioned Ariantari. He had 3 legal moves in the position he was in check, but he'd pre-moved the only losing move to capture a pawn when actually his king should have just run away anywhere safe from the check, and it would have been a draw.
So you really have to be sure before pre-moving.
And that cost him. He was so close to qualification.
Yeah.
And now, OK, I think Wei Yi's trying to get a draw now by just swapping off all the rooks. It's definitely only black who can be better here, just because these 3 pawns are not very flexible. They're not very mobile, as we say. The pawns, if they step forward, this pawn, for example, stepping forward, that would just ruin white's pawn structure. This one would ruin the dark squares. So we do see a trade, and the black rook get active. Yeah, the problem for Levon Aronian is, can you advance these 3 to beat white's 2 on this side of the board? Can you get the black king active? How do you target white's weaknesses here and here? Not easy. Still a lot of work to be done, but you guys, who would you take?
Levon's position, I mean, I had completely forgotten that black had a pawn majority on that side. So when you mentioned that plan, I was like, oh, yes, of course. Just utilise that extra pawn there. And as a bonus, just try to also keep an eye contact with the weak pawns. You know, try to do everything at once. I mean, I like Levon's position, and I think he has the time. He has the incentive.
So he's playing for the win.
Yeah, you know, this is a dream position to grind out. OK, if you don't manage to do anything, great, your opponent defended well. But if you manage just to put a pressure on your opponent, and bearing in mind, Wei Yi has just over 2.5 minutes on the clock. Not that much time for many of us. So why not?
He set a nasty trap as well. There's a big threat on the board. Bishop takes pawn is actually a threat right now because, for example, the white king is suddenly overworked. It wants to take the black bishop, but it would lose control over the white bishop. So black would have won a pawn in the process. That being said, white actually stopped this threat by pushing a pawn in the centre, and Levon has actually lost 2 moves. He moved his bishop forward and then he moved it back again where it came from. But he's provoked white's pawn forward onto a light square. And this is relevant because now, if the rooks disappear, then black's king has a clear path on the dark squares into the position. So watch out for that kind of manoeuvre happening a bit later on. Because white's pawn has stepped forward, he's lost the integrity of his pawn structure, lost all control over the dark squares. But Wei Yi has a specific idea in mind by bringing his rook across. Now, to stop this idea of the king coming forward, I think he wants to just step his pawn forward with a sacrifice and get his rook into the game. This is how a lot of the top Chinese players play, actually. They try to solve strategic problems with tactics and with dynamism, and sacrificing a pawn here would be, I think, actually a great thing for white. So a small mini threat, pushing the pawn forward. Maybe this is one Levon missed, or underestimated at least.
A very crafty move indeed. And there we see Levon thinking. Do you think, I was going to ask, do you think Levon will burn extra time on his clock just to deal with this, or will he just kind of continue as normal and just go, well, it is what it is, well done?
Yeah, I don't think he wants to allow that white pawn from advancing, really. It seems like white could even get a better position, I feel, if that pawn goes up. So if I was Lev, I'd be thinking of either stopping that by moving my pawn 2 squares, but that comes with a lot of risk as well. It changes the strategic nature of the game, because I clamp down on those white pawns in the centre, so the double pawns become very weak, but I give white a very powerful passed pawn, protected passed pawn. That's only 3 squares from queening. But I'd be thinking along this way. Maybe I could even also push that pawn 1 square as well, maybe. Do something like this. But I wouldn't really want to allow my opponent, if I was Lev, to do the plan that he wants to do. 1, it's never really good to allow your opponent to do a plan. And 2, it just looks like a good plan. So I need to, I'd rather stop it if I can somehow. I mean, there's other natural moves here as well, I'm sure. But, I think this is a very good plan from Wei Yi, actually.
Yeah, this pawn push does look pretty menacing. I guess there are other ways. Maybe you could put your rook in the centre of the board, keep an eye on this guy. Or you could maybe, after white moved his rook across, rather than the black rook coming up, you could first hit the white rook. He has done this, and put your bishop in the centre of the board, I guess, just to guard this pawn. So just preventing white from stepping the pawn next to it up the board. He would lose the central pawn if he does that. I'm thinking that a bishop exchange here, I'm looking at rook exchanges, bishop exchanges. I think a rook exchange, bishop exchange would favour white in general, but in this exact situation, getting the bishops off the board would definitely improve the black rook. So maybe in this exact scenario, this is something Levon Aronian can try. But for example, if he parks his bishop in the middle of the board, okay, which he has just done, now there is this clear plan, remember, of the black king coming in. And what can white do? If white trades the bishops, maybe that favours black. If white trades the rooks ever, that definitely favours black, because black will control the dark squares. I don't really see any kind of exchanges that save white at the moment.
Yeah, it's a question of timing, isn't it? And yeah, white will have to start doing some active operations. And there he goes with the A pawn, and he's intending to soften up Black's pawn structure there on the left. And there's nothing that Levon can do, so he just returns to the original plan, which is just to bring the king to the centre.
Yep, it would make a lot of sense, at least for White, to trade off the A-pawn for one of Black's pawns, because that is an isolated pawn after all. It sits on the light square now, so you can't keep it there any longer. Wise way you thinking. He started a plan, you have to be consistent with it before it's too late. Just push that A-pawn forward again. Yep. It's a temporary pawn sacrifice, but if the B file comes open for White's rook, that would be fantastic. So step that pawn forward.
Yeah, it just seems to be overthinking things a little bit, Wei, doesn't he? A little bit nervous in this first game, which, you know, and also you can't move this slowly when you've got 1 minute, 20 seconds left. They've both got 1 minute, 1.5 minutes basically. Lev's position looks quite nice to me. I mean, that king, as you pointed out, it's just coming in on the dart squares. So I think something like this is the right idea. If I was White here, I'd try to swap off pieces, swap off pawns, make some exchanges, get nearer to a draw. Yeah. So, I mean, the danger of this move is Black's rook now gets in, and having an active rook is really important in rook endings.
The bar is going up for Levon, and you did say that this would look good for the Black side.
That's the thing, Simon's right. In general, a bishop exchange does help White, just because rook endgames have this kind of drawish tendency in general. But in this exact situation, the Black rook is so active.
Well, he has to go c5 here. I mean,
has to trade off pawns. Yeah,
c5. Then you've got ideas of moving the pawn next to that. So I mean, that if he goes passive here, he's in loads of trouble, I think.
Black's king gets 2 moves to move into the centre. Yeah, as you mentioned, game over.
Yeah.
But the problem is that Black's rook has gone rogue. And now you need to start calculating. Yes, he's played the pawn move, and this is the move that I was thinking Levon would play. Attack a pawn and, again, threaten to initiate chaos, because every single time Wei Yi will be considering what's going to happen after pawn takes pawn.
Yeah, I suppose the good thing for Wei Yi, he's got 4 pawns on the queen side, the left-hand side. Black's got 3 pawns. If he loses a pawn on that area of the board, but able to swap off all the pawns, it's a draw. So if you just see where the kings are, Black, you know, if you're just dealing with those pawns and nothing else on that side of the board, it's not enough to win. Rook endings are very often drawn. So maybe that could be something that is going to save Wei Yi later on, maybe.
I agree, Simon.
Just if he can manage those exchanges. But they're both now getting under a minute. So it's... and here we see the first exchange happen. Black King's still coming in, though, isn't it? That Black King is still stepping in, but...
Do we think White's rook has to go active now, or does White's
absolutely.
king have to go active?
Definitely go active, I think, now,
With the rook, yeah.
I mean...
Just abandon everything, just White's rook has to get to the 7th rank.
Take your chance now.
Exactly.
Have to gamble.
Create some pass pawns, and he's done that.
So he's actually 2 pawns down currently, Wei Yi, but the White King is suddenly super active, and the White rook is super active. So that's a good endgame idea.
Yeah. And a very interesting move from the Chinese player, because here, if Levon were to get super greedy and go for a 3rd pawn, well, actually, White's pawn in the middle of the board is going to be a strong one. It's only 3 squares away from queening, and it will have the assistance of the rook and the king in its promotion hopes.
This is odd from Levon Aronian. He's just given up a pawn with check, but he has got the Black King active temporarily. So White has options here. White has 2 pawns he could capture, the A pawn, the F pawn, or he could just slide back the White rook 1 square and check back the Black King. That might be why.
It's confusing here, right? I mean, these choices. Yeah. I mean, you give the check. I think giving the check's good, you know, to try and force the Black King to a worse square, right?
Yeah, because if Black gets time to step the Black rook back 1 square and check the White King, White's King is the one forced backwards. I mean, I'm just really surprised what Levon's done, to be honest. I think he could have played for a win in a far safer way. Now it's just...
Could lose this one, couldn't he? Because that white pawn in the centre of the board is so strong. If the White rook can now get active, maybe going to the left-hand side, you know, like he's played now. I mean, this is we saw something similar, didn't we, in another game? I think it was yesterday, where it was just that 1 pawn that White had was so scary, and it won the game for... I think it won the game for someone.
But I think this is great defensive technique from Levon, and I think he's doing this, but also at the same time kind of keeping that draw in the pocket, because now that white pawn in the middle doesn't have the aid of its king. So he could, if he wanted to bail out, could just start attacking the pawn in the middle.
Yeah. Maybe this is what's going to happen now. We could, see those exchanges.
I'm also feeling the heat a little bit. If I were playing black, I would be like, OK, just bail out now. This feels like it's gone wrong.
Yeah.
White's gotten too active.
Definitely lost control as Aronian, but he is currently a pawn up, so, OK, going for White's G2 pawn now on the second rank. That's slightly surprising, I've got to say. He's just kind of making a useful waiting move, I guess. So, again, as you guys mentioned, if that black A pawn falls, as soon as the white rook leaves the 6th rank, black's king comes into the centre. So Wei Yi also waits and just offers a pawn trade. Probably very sensible. The more pawns that disappear, the closer you are to a draw.
Lots of pawns getting exchanged off, right? And, that you have to say the draw is very likely at the moment, just because there's not going to be many pawns left on the board.
It feels like a huge missed opportunity for Levon. I think he initiated all these forcing moves, just one move too soon. Yeah, I'm thinking back to a previous position, and I think black's king could have got much more active than it currently is.
But wait 1 second here. I mean, suddenly the white king has taken a step back. It's lost kind of coordination with the pawn and the rook. And I feel that this is... OK, no, I stand corrected. Levon has decided to repeat moves. The king is back on the 4th row.
OK, but black's rook is on a new square now, so can black's rook get greedy? Go and capture white's H-pawn, maybe?
Yep. Oh, I'm not sure about this position anymore. I mean, it's getting wild.
Who are you liking it for, then?
I have to say I'm liking it for Levon.
OK.
But at the same time, I feel that Wei Yi's king and rook are so active that it probably will end in a draw.
It's just really instructive in general what Wei Yi did. He gave up 2 pawns. He was 2 pawns down for a while, but he just went active with his king and rook. Compare it to a few moves before when white's king and rook were passive. It was level material, but he was suffering. So I think that's a lesson for everyone at home, and one that, I mean, we'll take away from this game. Just go active.
Surely a draw now. Isn't this the 3rd time? Or
it's the 2nd time we've seen this position now.
So if he goes check here, it will be a draw.
No, but he's gone for it. He's taken the pawn. And, OK,
he's using the Wei Yi strategy of repeating position twice, teasing us and then playing for the win.
Well, he did say that he wanted to take inspiration from the youngsters, and I guess that's what he's doing.
Yeah.
The problem for black is, again, 2 pawns up, but look at the black pawns. They're all isolated. They're not connected. One by one, they should start to drop. That's the first one.
White's rook seems to be an ideal square there as well. I mean, it can always grab a pawn at any moment. It cuts the black king off. White's central pawn is very good. So, again, this still seems like pretty dead draw to me, really.
Look at Levon. He just leaned back. He realises now that the winning chances have pretty much disappeared. Still a good result for him, a draw, we've got to say, as black.
Yeah, that's true.
He only needs 2 out of 4 today.
So it's when he moved his rook in and he could have moved his king in was maybe the slight missed opportunity, but we can have a look at it later anyway.
Quite possibly.
Yeah.
But, OK, he's running with 1 pawn. Is Harry going to win the day, do you think, Simon?
Nah, not in this one. I don't think so. I think White's... I mean, how's White going to do it? I don't know. Could you... I mean, I'd like to get my king a bit more centralised, but there's an annoying check, because if I can move the white king 1 square to the left, then I'm threatening some very strong moves there. So he's kind of moved it diagonally, so it can't be checked. Yep. And now there's just a threat of perpetual check with the white rook. And, well, they're only going to have 2 pawns each anyway, so, I mean, I just can't see this being lasting much longer, really.
Yeah, and these rook pawns, so the A and H pawns, in some endgames, for example, knight endgames, they're so powerful, but in rook endgames, they're just so easy to stop. And Levon Aronian, there we go, shaking his head. I think we'll see the draw happen now. Pretty much white's rook will just go and grab a pawn. It actually has a couple of pawns to choose. It takes the most obvious pawn, and, OK, Levon's king moves. White's rook will just find any safe square.
He could push the pawn, maybe.
No, he can't.
Oh, no, he can't.
He can't. That would be a trap,
Got cheapoed.
So he can't get clever here, where his rook is attacked. This pawn is stepping forward. It looks like white's about to make a new queen, but unfortunately, black's rook can stop it. You can't slide across yet, because white's king covers that square. First, you give a check, hitting the king, and next move, you slide across, and you're just in time to stop this pawn. So, OK, of course, he spots that, and he doesn't get hasty, but this is a threat now, maybe, to push forward. Levon should really force the draw now, though, just before it's too late.
Yeah.
And he only has 22 seconds on the clock, and Wei Yi has 12, 10, 9. It's ticking down.
Whose pawn is faster? The answer is neither. White's rook just stops this pawn. OK, small trap here for Levon Aronian that he set on Wei Yi. If this pawn was captured, we would see a check. And suddenly, after a rook trade, this black pawn does win the day. It's impossible to stop. So that was a small trap, but Wei Yi, of course, spotted that as well. These guys are too good to fall into one-move blunders. He drops his rook back. And now, after this rook move, I'm expecting to see the white pawn start pushing forward. This will act as a distraction, and White's rook will, meanwhile, gobble up one or both of these pawns. It should be a draw, but risking stuff.
7, 6. Clock is going down. OK, the pawn pushes forward, as David's indicated. And, well, the race is kicked off, but it is a race that probably will just result in trades.
Yep.
5. But it's making me nervous, actually, watching them run down the clock so much. And Wei Yi is... Yeah, I know. He keeps surprising us at every turn. Just when we think it is a draw, he makes a different type of move. And the game continues.
You have to be really careful as Wei Yi now. You have to get your rook behind that black H-pawn. It's 2 squares away. Yeah, suddenly it's a bit more complicated. It should still be a draw, of course. The pawns can be stopped by the opponent's rooks. But Wei Yi under 10 seconds the whole time, playing with fire.
Yeah. But now we're going to see it.
Well,
now,
is this so clear? I mean...
Yeah.
Probably.
The black rook is his turn to put the rook behind the passed pawn.
And if you play that, isn't black still... Black still seems to be pushing to me here.
Why didn't Wei Yi push this pawn a few moves ago? I mean, it should still be a draw, maybe, but...
But you might win a pawn with black now. The black king is active and white's pieces can't do anything. So
has he?
Not...
Oh, I don't think he's lost on time. He may...
Oh,
clock's to 0.
Is he lost on time?
Has he lost on time?
I don't think he lost on time, but...
But the bar he's also blundered.
Look at the bar!
He's just lost a pawn.
What happened? What's going on? Did he lose on time?
What has happened?
I think it's a mouse slip.
What happened there? How did he mouse slip?
He's just lost.
He wanted to defend his pawn.
What a dramatic finish to the first game. It looks like Wei Yi has lost this. Levon Aronian taking the lead. Oh, wow. Heartbreak for Wei Yi. Both players, they seem a little confused. Well, Wei Yi seemed just devastated.
We're confused as well. Was that losing on time because he only had 5 seconds at the end there? Surely he wouldn't resign in a position like this. Surely he would at least play on a few more moves, even if he's blundered. It's really surprising, kind of out of the middle of nowhere. It was just completely drawn 2 moves ago. He self-destructed Wei Yi. It was just the momentous occasion, the nerves of a final, something, but Levon takes it again.
Wow.